It was the night my father died. I remember the phone on my nightstand lighting up in the darkness, some unknown hour past midnight. My heart felt thick, and my chest tightened with an immediate sense of dread. I could practically taste the tension in my throat before I even answered. They told me he'd passed in his sleep, without pain, which was meant to comfort me. It didn't. I just sat there, hearing the buzz of the dial tone after the call ended, feeling like someone had slammed a door inside my head. The room was still and cold. I put the phone down and glanced at the crack of light under the bedroom door. That was when I heard something down the hall, in the living room. The faint creak of the old floorboards. A murmur, like a voice stifled behind a hand. It made no sense. My father was gone, and my wife should have been asleep in our bed. But there was that sound again, hushed, urgent. I moved carefully, each step feeling like it weighed 100 pounds. I wanted to shout at the darkness, but everything in me stayed silent. I turned the corner, and there she was. Anna. My wife. She was standing in the living room, her hand on another man's shoulder, his silhouette outlined by the dull light from the kitchen. His name was Danny, but I didn't know that yet. Didn't know the shape of his face or the smug way he'd smile. All I saw was her leaning in, her hand sliding up his arm like it belonged there, her lips close to his ear. My stomach twisted. A wave of numbness broke through me. That image burned itself into my memory. Her pale fingers against his dark jacket. Her wedding ring glinting, betraying me in plain sight. I might have made a sound, or maybe I didn't. All I know is that suddenly they both froze. Anna spun around. Her eyes flickered wide, shock, fear, guilt, everything compressed into a single flash in her stare. And he just stood there, mouth half open, like he was ready to throw out some worthless excuse. I felt a dryness in my throat that turned into a bitter laugh. It wasn't a real laugh, more like a spasm. A piece of black humor forcing itself out of my lungs when I was too stunned to speak. That was the beginning. Of course, I'd find out soon enough the deeper secrets, the times they'd met, the times she'd lied, the child who carried someone else's blood, not mine. But right then, in that single frozen heartbeat, I only understood one thing: the woman I loved, my wife, was pressed up against another man on the very night my father slipped away from this life. A new kind of coldness formed in my gut, overshadowing even the grief for my dad. It was a special brand of fury, betrayal, heartbreak all swirling into a single savage punch. I walked right past them to the front door. I don't remember if I said a word. Maybe I mumbled, "I have to go," or maybe nothing at all. I stepped into the chilly night and stood under the porch light. My father's death. Her infidelity. It was like my mind short-circuited. So I stood there, staring at the empty street, while they stayed inside. I could hear Anna's voice pitched high, frantic with fear. She probably expected me to explode, to confront them. But I couldn't do it. I just left the house and started walking nowhere in particular. Block after block, wind biting my face. My breath coming out in ragged puffs. Everything felt heavier with each step. No one prepares you for that brand of betrayal. No father, no friend, no mentor. Because when it actually happens, every piece of advice and wisdom flies out the window. All that's left is the raw sensation of losing something that was never yours, or so you realize too late. I have no memory of how long I wandered. At some point, I found myself at a 24-hour diner, sipping stale coffee, my eyes burning from the cheap fluorescent lights. Around 4 or 5 in the morning, I headed back home. My father was dead, my marriage was a wreck, and I was a hollow man stepping across my own threshold. The next day blurred by. We had to deal with funeral arrangements. Anna hovered around me, eyes rimmed red, whispering, "I'm so sorry, please, James, please talk to me," but I pushed her aside in my mind. She tried to console me about my father, and I let her. I needed that piece of warmth, however false. I needed it more than my anger at her. Grief clung to my bones like a damp chill you can't shake off. So for a short time, I pretended I hadn't seen anything. A man can compartmentalize horrors when forced. And I was forced. But grief doesn't pause for illusions. After my father's funeral, the reality of what she'd done seeped back in. I tried to keep my fury locked in some secret chamber of my mind. Tried to act like a decent husband, especially because of our boy. Yet, a few days later, an envelope arrived, archivist's records. Something about updated digital data on birth certificates or paternal records. I'd ordered them, half out of curiosity. I'd thought it might be neat to see the official genealogical pages that now exist online. When I flipped to the page about my son, my name wasn't there under Father. Instead, it had a different line, Father, Danny Fletcher. At first I assumed it was a clerical error. But my heart hammered. My hands trembled so badly I nearly tore the paper. Even as I wanted to deny it, some part of me already knew it was true. I confronted Anna that evening. Actually, confronted is the wrong word. I asked her, quietly, is he mine? She blinked. Her cheeks went pale, her eyes fluttering as if she were about to faint. That told me everything. She whispered 1,000 excuses. She talked about how it happened, how it was only once, but apparently enough for biology to do its work. She said it was back when we were first married, and she was unsure of our future, afraid of your temper, or scared you'd leave. The usual script, I guess. I just stood there, feeling this dull ring in my ears, the world fading around me. He's my son, I kept telling myself. I raised him. I love him. I feed him. I hold him when he's sick. I teach him to throw a baseball. I read him stories. I am his father, aren't I? I wanted to scream or break something, but this savage calm took over instead. That night, she fell asleep sobbing. At some point, close to midnight, she started talking in her sleep. Not just mumbling, but practically shouting. She called out a name, one that wasn't mine. She gasped things like, don't stop, and I need you. Each syllable stabbed me in the gut, but I just sat there in the dark, listening. And when her voice died away, I slipped out of bed and rummaged in the storage closet. I found a small camera we used for home security. I set it up on the bookshelf in the living room, angled to face the couch. I told myself it was for protection, because I didn't trust her, didn't trust him. But the truth is, I wanted confirmation, I wanted that moment of revelation recorded, in case I needed evidence to burn down the life we'd built. Or maybe I wanted to see if she was still meeting him. I was beyond rational at that point. The next few weeks were a blur of funerary paperwork, half-silent dinners, forced smiles at the office. I was numb. And she tried so hard to fix things, to be the caring, attentive wife. She'd press her hand to mine, searching for reassurance, but I'd pull away. Slowly, I took control of everything, our bank accounts, her schedule, the people she saw. I was quiet, polite, helpful on the surface, but inside I was a void. The camera remained hidden. Sometimes, late at night, she'd toss and turn, moaning that name. And I recorded her every word, night after night. It was a twisted compulsion. I felt like a man collecting bullets, forging them into bigger and sharper shells. I wanted to wait until the perfect moment to use them. One evening, after I'd put our boy to bed, God, I couldn't look at him without this crushing mix of love and bitterness, I went into the kitchen. Anna was there in her robe, hugging herself by the sink. She jumped a little when I walked in. I didn't say anything. She tried to speak, but I just stared at her. My silence was suffocating. I could see her struggling to breathe. James, she ventured, can we talk? Her voice trembled. I set my mug on the counter and nodded once, as if giving her permission. She launched into apologies, confessions, half-baked explanations of how she was lonely, how it was a mistake, how she'd felt neglected. I listened, stone-faced. Then I quietly said, "Tell me everything again." Exactly as it happened. I pulled out my phone and set it to record. Her eyes went wide, but I just stared until she began. She repeated the story in a shaking whisper, how Danny was an old friend, how she'd run into him one afternoon, how one thing led to another. I made her repeat each phrase, clarifying details, speaking them into the phone like a testimony in front of a judge. When she finished, tears were streaming down her cheeks. "Enough," I said. Then I picked up the phone, saved the recording, and walked away. She sank to the floor and covered her face. I didn't try to comfort her. That capacity in me had shut down. In the following days, I started to treat our marriage like a chessboard. I controlled the finances. I told her I needed access to her email. I said it was for family budgeting, but it was my way of keeping her on a leash. She complied, a frightened look in her eyes. I advised her on how to manage every dollar. She rarely left the house without asking me first. She was desperate to prove her loyalty, and in that desperation, she gave up all her autonomy. Instead of feeling triumph, I felt emptier. But I kept going, like I had no choice. At night, I'd lie next to her, thinking about how her body once pressed against that other man, how her mouth shaped his name. An image would flash through my head, her hand on his shoulder, exactly the way I saw it in the living room that night. But I'd do nothing but stare into the darkness. Sometimes she'd whimper in her sleep. I'd roll onto my side and watch the shadows flicker across her face. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My father was gone, my trust was shattered, and the woman I once adored was a stranger wrapped in the same familiar body. Then Danny started calling. Not on the house phone, but on her cell. She thought I didn't know. But I had access to the online records from the phone company. Late-night calls lasting a few minutes. Text messages that popped up, then got deleted. I never confronted her about it. I waited and waited, letting my anger smolder under the surface like a hidden fuse. Soon enough, I had hundreds of screenshots. More bullets in my arsenal. One rainy evening, I came home to find her on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, phone in hand. She didn't hear me come in. I walked silently to the living room doorway. The camera on the bookshelf was there, as always, capturing every detail. She was on a video call. A man's voice. Danny. I recognized his timbre from the night I first heard him speak. She was talking quietly, tears glistening in her eyes, telling him how she felt trapped, how I was so distant, how she missed him. I should have stormed in, but I stood there, hidden by the darkness. She whispered, "I'm so sorry, I don't know what to do. He's not the same man anymore." Then there was a low rumble of Danny's voice telling her everything would be okay, that he'd come by soon, that they could figure this out. She nodded, tears dripping onto her blanket. When she finally hung up, I made myself known. I stepped forward so she could see me. She sucked in a breath like a child caught stealing. I said nothing. She dropped the phone, color draining from her face. The blanket slid off her lap, revealing she wore only a thin nightgown that clung to her skin. Even in that moment of betrayal, I noticed how beautiful she was, how that curve of her shoulder used to set my heart on fire. Now it just made me nauseous. I left the room, my heart hammering but my face composed. Upstairs, I sat at my desk, scrolling through the videos from the hidden camera. I watched her speaking on the phone, tears in her voice. Then I watched older footage, her asleep on the couch, twitching, calling his name in restless dreams. My father's old watch lay next to the keyboard. I picked it up, turned it over in my hand. He'd left it to me, and I couldn't help feeling the weight of his memory. I remember he once told me, if someone spits in your face, don't just wipe it off. Make sure they never do it again. It wasn't exactly fatherly wisdom from the pages of a perfect parenting manual, but it stuck with me. Maybe that's what I was doing, collecting spit, storing it, preparing for a final retribution. In the days that followed, I confronted Anna about the calls. She didn't deny them. She pleaded that they were innocent, that she was confused, that she just needed closure. I listened without blinking. Then I calmly told her to call him again, to put him on speaker. "Tell me every word you say," I demanded. She refused at first, tears dripping from her chin. I repeated the command, my voice low and unrelenting. Finally, trembling, she dialed. He didn't pick up. But the next day, he texted her. So I told her to bring the phone to me. I made her read every text out loud, emphasizing each line. She tried to keep it vague, but I insisted on hearing it all. Even the flirtations, the little inside jokes. Danny typed messages like, "Remember how it felt that night?" or "I can't get you out of my head." She read them in a shaking whisper, stammering over each suggestive phrase. The more she said, the more she unraveled. I nodded, storing the recordings. At one point, I found myself smiling, a dark, humorless grin. She noticed and asked, "Why are you looking at me like that?" I shrugged. "Just making sure everything's documented," I said. In the middle of it all, I felt this wave of black amusement. My father's funeral had been so quiet, so sad, and now here I was, orchestrating a living funeral for my marriage. The only difference was there were no kind words, no flowers, no illusions. Just the slow, methodical process of dissecting every lie, every deceitful whisper. Days turned into weeks. My job as a system administrator at the local school felt like a distant routine. I went through the motions, fixing computer labs, troubleshooting network issues, while inside, I was consumed by the betrayal. Each night, I'd come home, greet my boy with a forced smile, help him with homework. As soon as he went to bed, the silent drama resumed. Anna hovered around me, hoping for some sign of forgiveness. I gave her none. I kept the monster in my chest quiet, letting it feed on my growing store of evidence. Finally, one afternoon, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Danny was in town again. My guess was he'd try to see her. I half expected to come home and catch them in a full-blown affair. So I prepared. I set my phone to record audio the moment I walked in. Then I readjusted the hidden camera in the living room. I had a gut feeling something big was about to happen, like a thunderstorm building on the horizon. I came home earlier than usual. The house was quiet. I found Anna in the kitchen, wearing a flimsy top and yoga pants. She looked both startled and relieved to see me so soon. She tried to greet me with a hug, but I stepped back. "Where's our boy?" I asked. She said he was at a friend's house for a sleepover. My mind sparked, perfect timing for a secret rendezvous. She must have seen the suspicion in my eyes because she swallowed nervously, busying her hands by wiping the counter. I walked into the living room and sat on the couch. "He's coming tonight, right?" I said. Anna's eyes flicked up. She parted her lips, maybe to deny it, but then lowered her gaze. She nodded. I almost admired the courage it took to be honest at last. "I asked him to come," she confessed, her voice shaking. I just need to end this, James. I need to see him face to face to tell him it's over. For good." I wanted to laugh at the irony. Right. To end it. My tone was cold enough to make her flinch. "Fine," I said. "Let him come." I got up, walked to the bookshelf. She knew about the camera by then, had to suspect it was there. But she said nothing. I guess she was too distressed, or maybe too resigned. An hour later, headlights swept across the window. She opened the door, and Danny stepped in. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing that casual confidence he always carried. I stood off to the side, arms folded. He glanced at me. "James," he said, trying to appear friendly. He offered a handshake. I didn't move. Anna's eyes jumped between us. Her voice sounded hollow. Danny, please, just sit. We need to talk. He shrugged, kept his gaze on me for another second, then turned to her. All right. She tried to break it off, just like she said. She told him it was too painful, that she'd made mistakes, that she was trying to save her marriage. The entire time, I stood there, silent, watching his face twist between anger and disbelief. He kept glancing my way as though expecting me to lash out or throw a punch. But I did nothing. Then he stood. You can't just cut me off like this, he said, voice rising. You told me you couldn't stand living in this house, that you felt trapped. Anna looked away, tears brimming. He took a step closer, and she pressed a hand to his chest. It was the same image from all those nights ago, her hand on his shoulder, his chest, wherever it could land. Something in me snapped. I spoke up, voice low. Anna, I said. Tell him exactly what you told me. She wiped her tears, confused. What do you mean? Word for word, I ordered. The part about your regrets, your deception, your son. She stared at me in shock. Danny looked from her to me. What the hell are you talking about? He asked. She swallowed. I told James that we got together before I realized what I wanted. Her eyes flicked to me, silently begging me not to push further. I felt that black humor flare up again. I let out a short, breathy laugh. Is that all? I said. You left out the bit about your child. His child. Danny's eyes went wide. Kid's mine, he almost shouted. You said it was a possibility, but the paperwork says it's certain, I interrupted. Anna paled. Her hand fell from his chest as though scalded. She choked on her words, staring at the floor. Danny tried to process, his jaw clenching. Then he hissed, You're raising my boy. I nodded slowly. So it seems. My voice was steady, but my heartbeat thundered. I gave that kid everything. Thought he was mine. You two must have had a good laugh. Anna burst out, It wasn't like that. I never wanted to hurt you. She turned to Danny. And you never wanted to be a father, remember? You told me that if I was pregnant, you couldn't handle it. So I kept quiet. But then James stepped up, and... Shut up, I snapped. She clamped her mouth shut. Danny ran a hand through his hair, face contorted in frustration. So all this time, he said to her, you let me think it was nothing. Meanwhile, you've got me on the birth certificate. Her voice trembled. I didn't put your name there. It must have been updated with the new digital archives. I swear, I didn't do it. She looked at me, tears streaming. James, I never wanted you to find out like this. I took a slow breath, letting the tension build. Maybe you both can talk it out. Tell me how it should have gone. I'm dying to know. My words dripped with sarcasm. Danny spun to me. Look, man, I get you're pissed off, but don't act like you're innocent here. You shut her down. You left her lonely. Don't blame me for stepping in. That was the moment. The spark in the powder keg. My fist itched, my knuckles nearly trembling with the urge to bury them in his face. Instead, I forced a smirk. Oh, I'm the one to blame. Sure. Let me just offer you a beer and a pat on the back. He glared at me, chest heaving. Anna tried to step between us, but neither of us budged. I repeated softly, tell him again, Anna. Tell him the part about how you cried in my bed, moaning his name in your sleep. She let out a muffled sob, burying her face in her hands. Danny's eyes flickered. You bastard, he spat at me. Can't you see she's suffering? He moved as if to comfort her, but I blocked his path with my arm. His shoulder clipped mine. For a split second, I considered letting the violence run loose. The temptation was wild, like a savage voice urging me to pound him into the floor. But I just pulled back. If you want her, take her, I said in a low, shaking breath. But if you do, you'd better take the boy too. Because you owe him that much. He paused, looking at me like I was insane. What do you mean? I mean I've raised him. Paid for everything. Taught him how to ride a bike. Stayed up all night when he had a fever. That's what a father does. Are you willing to do all that? He just stared, no answer forming on his lips. Then he glanced at Anna, searching for some kind of clue. She only wept, arms wrapped around herself. I laughed again, that same hollow sound. Yeah. That's what I thought. A heavy silence pressed down. Finally, I waved toward the door. I think it's time for you to leave. He stepped back, eyes flicking to Anna. She didn't move. Then, with a curse under his breath, he yanked open the door and walked out into the night. The door slammed behind him, shaking the walls. Anna let out a broken cry, collapsing onto the couch. I stood over her, fists clenched, rage pulsing in my veins. All that tension, all that heartbreak, condensed into a single fierce storm inside my head. She tried to reach for my hand. James, I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. I pulled away, leaving her grasping at empty air. You love me. You sure about that? My voice cracked. Then the tears came, sudden and uncontrollable, running hot down my cheeks. She tried to stand, to wrap her arms around me. I shoved her back, gently but firmly, never meeting her eyes. Don't, I hissed. She sank down, sobbing. And I turned, heading upstairs. My heart was pounding so violently, I thought it would burst. I felt as though I was choking on her betrayal. In the weeks that followed, I did exactly what I'd been threatening internally for so long. I gathered every shred of evidence, the recorded phone calls, the text transcripts, the camera footage. I compiled them meticulously, as though building a legal case. And then I confronted her again, this time with a plan. The funeral of our marriage was about to begin in earnest. I sat her at the dining table, laid out a stack of documents. Bank statements, phone records, those paternal archives that listed Danny Fletcher as father. She stared at them, trembling. James, she whispered, why are you doing this? I leaned forward. Because you said you love me. Then you gave yourself to another man, shared secrets and lies, brought his child into my life without telling me. You hollowed out our home. And you expect me to keep living as if everything's fine. She tried to speak, but I raised a hand, silencing her. I'm not asking for your explanation. I'm done with words. Her eyes filled again, but I pressed on. I've recorded your confessions, your phone calls, your texts. I could ruin you. I could broadcast your betrayal to the world. Or I could vanish from this house, from your life, leaving you to pick up the pieces. You choose. She stared at me, horror and heartbreak twisting across her face. What do you want from me? She said in a choked voice. I almost smiled. What I want, I whispered, is for you to feel exactly what I felt. That sense of helplessness, being cornered, forced into decisions you hate. That sense of everything you love being threatened. My hand hovered over the papers. That's what I want. She swallowed hard. You've already taken control of everything, my accounts, my independence. I gave it all to you. What more do you need? I closed my eyes, a wave of exhaustion passing through me. That was just the beginning, I muttered. I wanted to see if you'd struggle or resist. You didn't. I opened my eyes again and looked straight at her. Now it's time for me to decide if I walk away, or if I stay and make you realize, day after day, just how deep my pain goes. She lowered her head, not even trying to argue. There was a small part of me that wanted her to fight, to scream at me, to say something that might crack my armor. But she just sat there, shattered. I stood up and paced around the table, glancing at the family photos on the wall. She and I, smiling on our wedding day. Our boys' toddler pictures. Vacations by the lake. All illusions. You know what's funny? I said, voice flat. My father died on the night I discovered your affair. 2 pillars of my life gone in one stroke. She raised her head, tears clinging to her lashes. I never planned that, she whispered. If I could take it back. I snorted. But you can't. And here we are. I walked toward the stairs, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Before I disappeared up the steps, I glanced back. Pack a bag, I said quietly. You need to go stay somewhere else tonight. Just for tonight. I need to be alone. She stared at me, eyes full of confusion and hurt. Then she nodded slowly, like a condemned prisoner. I waited in the hallway while she gathered her things. She walked out the door without a word. A short while later, I heard her car drive off into the evening. The silence in the house was staggering. I sat on the couch and let out a breath that felt like it had been locked inside me for days. The camera was still perched on the shelf. It had recorded everything again. I wondered what I'd see if I played it back, probably just my stoic face and her tearful confessions. I was so tired of it all. Father gone. The child not mine. The woman who promised, forever, caught in a web of lies. I felt the weight in my chest, pressing down. Then something inside me shifted. The black humor rose like a bubble, and I actually laughed, a short, bitter outburst that sounded eerie in the empty house. And that laughter turned into a series of half-sobs, half-chuckles, as though my grief and my rage had merged into something monstrous. I found myself talking out loud, Dad, if you're watching this from wherever you are, you see what's happened to your son. Isn't it hilarious? 2 funerals in one night. I must have drifted in and out of that trance for hours. Eventually, I got up and rummaged in the closet. I found my father's old army trunk. Inside were his medals, his letters, that watch he'd given me. I also found a battered photo of him holding me as a baby. I traced the outline of his face. He was a tough man, not always kind, but he taught me to stand my ground. A part of me wanted to stomp out every memory because I felt I'd failed him. But another part clung to that memory like a lifeline. Don't let them spit in your face. Make sure they never do it again. 2 days later, I told Anna to come back. She walked in looking pale, her eyes hollow, carrying a duffel bag. Our boy was still at a friend's place, or maybe she'd arranged for him to be with her parents. I barely asked. My mind was fixated on the final act. She stood in the hallway, uncertain. I'm staying at a motel, she murmured. Is that okay? I just came to get more clothes. I gestured for her to follow me to the living room. She did, clutching the strap of her bag. Then, slowly, I reached for the camera on the shelf. For the first time, I let her see it clearly. This was never just for protection, I said. Her eyes flicked to the lens. She took a step back. I know, she whispered. You know, I repeated. Good. Then I turned it off. Her eyebrows rose in a silent question. I set it on the table, facing away from us. I don't need that anymore. She swallowed. James, please, can you at least tell me what happens now? Now, I said, I decide if there's any chance of rebuilding, or if I rip this family apart. I stared at her. And that depends on you. On whether you can handle being a wife to a man you've wronged more deeply than you could ever imagine. Her lips trembled. I'll do anything, she whispered. Anything to prove myself. A bitter smirk tugged at my mouth. Anything, huh? I closed my eyes, inhaled slowly. Then I opened them. Then from now on, you cut him out. No phone calls, no secret texts, no running to him when you can't sleep at night. And I keep all the evidence. If you ever try to betray me again, or take my child away, even though, biologically, he's not mine, I'll use everything to make sure the courts see the truth. I'll fight you for custody, and you'll lose. She paled, tears threatening again. He's your son, God, he loves you, James. I'd never try to take him from you. Don't give me a reason to doubt that, I said, my voice cold. She nodded, hugging herself. We stood there in tense silence. Finally, I sighed. Leave your bag. You're staying here tonight. She blinked, stunned. But I thought. I can't make decisions about the future if you're not here, I snapped. She flinched, but obeyed. She set her bag down, took a shaky breath. Then, quietly, she asked, "Are you going to forgive me?" I stared at her, all the bitterness, the heartbreak, the black humor swirling inside me. I'll be honest, I don't know what forgiveness looks like anymore. I only know I'm not finished yet. You broke something in me that might never heal, but if you're willing to live with that, maybe we'll figure out some arrangement. She stared, her lips parted, as though wanting to ask for something softer. But she saw the darkness in my expression and closed her mouth. That night, we slept in the same bed. Or rather, I lay there with my eyes open while she, after an hour of stiff trembling, finally drifted off. Around 2 in the morning, I felt her shift closer. She reached out, laying a hand on my chest. It was gentle, tentative. I let her touch me. A memory sparked, the nights when that same hand would make me feel safe, at peace. Now it felt foreign, tinged with betrayal. I forced myself not to push her away. This was part of my plan, part of my twisted sense of justice. Let her try to love me in my brokenness. Let her see how it feels to hold a shell of a man she once adored. I wondered if she felt my heart pounding, or if she mistook it for longing. Maybe it was a bit of both. My breath came uneven, almost like a sob. But I didn't cry. I just let the tension swirl in my gut until exhaustion finally claimed me, pulling me down into a dreamless pit. In the morning, I got up, dressed, and walked out to the yard while she was still asleep. The sky was gray, a cold wind blowing across the grass. I stared up, eyes stinging, thinking about my father. Imagining his voice, telling me to either get out or fight back. Maybe I'd done a bit of both, in my own way. I let out a ragged sigh, half laugh, half groan. Then I went inside, found Anna in the kitchen making coffee. She looked over, hair tangled, eyes puffy. I just nodded, sat down at the table. She brought me a mug. It tasted bitter, too strong, but I drank it anyway. We didn't speak for a while. Finally, she asked, voice hushed, "Do you still want me to go?" I gazed into the black coffee, swirling it slowly. "No," I said. "Not yet." She blinked, relief and dread mingling on her face. "I'll do whatever it takes," she breathed. I didn't answer. Instead, I forced a small smile that felt like a grimace. "I know you will," I said softly. Inside, a wave of grim satisfaction mingled with a hollow ache. I'd gained control, but at what cost? I was a man whose father died on the same night he watched his wife with someone else. I was a man who discovered his child shared a stranger's DNA. Yet, strangely, I felt stronger than I ever had. Like the pain had tempered me, forging a darker steel in my spine. That realization both thrilled and terrified me. Over the next few days, I worked on the house. Changed the locks. Put up new pictures. Rearranged furniture. I told Anna I needed the space to feel different. She followed my lead, quietly helping wherever she could. At times, I'd catch her looking at me with a mix of sorrow and longing, maybe guilt. I never let her see me return that look. I kept my guard up. In a twisted way, I felt like an emperor in my own little domain, watching her struggle to find her place in my new order. Our son came back eventually, bounding through the door with a huge smile, hugging me, hugging his mother. He was oblivious to the storm raging between us. We both forced bright faces for him. Neither of us wanted to hurt him more than he'd eventually be hurt anyway by the truth. But for now, he was happy to be home. I carried his bag upstairs, listening to him chatter about his friend's house, the games they played. My throat tightened. I'd never stop loving this boy. Biology be damned. If Danny wanted to claim him, well, he'd have to fight me tooth and nail. And from what I'd seen, that man didn't have the guts for real fatherhood. Days turned to weeks. The tension between Anna and me became a sort of routine. Some nights she'd cry, whispering apologies in the dark. I'd pretend to be asleep. Other nights, she'd slide closer to me, resting her head on my shoulder, testing if I'd allow any closeness. Sometimes I did, sometimes I moved away. Every time, I felt that swirl of black humor inside me, that sense of savage pleasure in making her wonder what I'd do next. One afternoon, I got a call from an attorney friend. I'd asked him hypothetical questions about custody. He gave me a thorough explanation. Even if the child isn't biologically mine, I have established paternity through years of marriage and recognition, so legally it'd be complicated for Danny to claim custody. Good. That was all I needed to know. I hung up, feeling a quiet relief. My father's watch glinted on my wrist, a silent reminder of that vow I'd made, never let them spit in my face again. Anna found me in the living room, reading the attorney's email. She hovered, waiting. "Is that about us?" she asked, voice trembling. "It's about me and my son," I corrected. She nodded, biting her lip. We let the matter drop. I realized something. The more I displayed my absolute unwillingness to yield, the more she latched onto me. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was some twisted love. Didn't matter. I set the phone aside. She lingered, as if hoping for a conversation. I stayed silent. Eventually, she asked, "Do you need anything?" Her voice was low, submissive, almost pitiful. I looked at her for a long moment, an avalanche of conflicting emotions churning in my mind. Then I said, "I need you to mean what you said, that you're done with him." She nodded vehemently, tears in her eyes. I noticed her fists clenched at her sides. That night, I caught a glimpse of her phone. She had changed her number, blocked his calls. I didn't tell her to, she did it of her own accord. The bitterness in my chest twisted. I felt a small flicker of something. A grudging respect. Maybe it was too late for that. But it was a start. And maybe part of me wanted a reason to believe we weren't completely doomed. Life settled into a strange pattern. I'd wake up, take our boy to school, go to work, come home, find Anna waiting with dinner. We'd chat about mundane things, bills, groceries, yard work, and avoid the gaping wound that lay between us. Sometimes, the tension gave way to forced pleasantries. Other times, it spilled into awkward silences. Through it all, I carried that sense of controlled vengeance, like a loaded gun in my back pocket. I knew I could pull the trigger anytime, divorce, expose her, crush the illusion of a stable family. Yet I waited. For what, I wasn't entirely sure. Maybe for the day I felt truly healed or truly destroyed, whichever came first. One evening, I came home to find her cleaning the hidden camera off the bookshelf. She turned when she heard me, a guilty look on her face. "It was dusty," she said. I studied her expression. Thinking of throwing it out? I asked calmly. She shook her head. "No. Just, it bothers me, seeing it." She set it back on the shelf. Then she swallowed. "James, can I ask you something?" I nodded, crossing my arms. She took a breath. Why keep me around if you hate me so much? Her voice shook. You have the power to ruin me, to take our boy, to end this marriage. Why do you let me stay? I stood there, considering. The words came slowly, like they were coated in razor blades, because you may have destroyed me, but that destruction made me stronger. I'm not the same man who walked in on you that first night. I've learned how to lock my heart in a steel box. And a part of me wants you to see what you turned me into. Wants you to live with it. With me. She let out a choked sob, turning away. I felt that pang of black humor again, how twisted it all sounded. But it was the truth. She left the room, and I stayed behind, leaning on the bookshelf for support. My father's ghost seemed to linger over my shoulder, nodding in approval of how I'd taken control. But I still felt the pang of regret, that possibility of a life that could have been simpler, happier, if only. More days passed, turning into weeks. The weight of the situation didn't vanish, but I found a grim equilibrium. Anna tried to show me loyalty at every turn, from letting me oversee her finances to giving me full transparency on her phone. Meanwhile, I began to let slip small gestures of kindness, praising her cooking, offering a short embrace before bed, just to see if my own heart still had any capacity for warmth. Sometimes, it felt good. Other times, it felt like a betrayal to my father's memory. But the house was calmer, and our boy seemed happier than before. So I kept going, step by step. Then came the final confrontation. Danny showed up one afternoon, unannounced, knocking at our door. Anna answered while I was in the garage. I heard voices. My heart leapt into my throat. I grabbed a wrench, my first instinct being defense. Then I realized I didn't need a weapon, not now. I walked into the living room. Danny stood by the couch, looking tense. Anna was in front of him, arms crossed. He glanced at me. I'm not here to fight, he said quickly. I need closure. I need to talk to Anna about the boy. He's mine. No, I cut him off. He's mine. You gave up that right when you let me raise him alone. He stepped back, raising his hands. Look, man, I'm not looking to tear your family apart. I swear. I just want to know if he's healthy, if he's okay. That's all. Anna looked to me, uncertain. I stared at Danny. Despite everything, I saw a flicker of genuine concern in his eyes. Something inside me shifted. I nodded slowly. He's fine, I said, voice level. He's a good kid. Healthy, happy. He doesn't know about you, and I'd prefer it stays that way. Danny's shoulders slumped a little. I understand, he muttered. Then he locked eyes with Anna. If you ever need anything for him, you know how to find me. She just nodded, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. I folded my arms, letting the tension gather, ready for him to argue. But he didn't. He just turned to the door. Then, pausing with his hand on the knob, he whispered, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if he was talking to me, or Anna, or both. Then he left. Anna turned to me, tears rolling freely. James, she had no words. I took a breath. He's done, I said flatly. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I stepped closer, took her trembling hand in mine. If he comes back again, you tell me first. She squeezed my hand in silent agreement. When our boy came home that evening, we had dinner together. It was quiet, the air thick with unspoken tension. But something had changed. That final door had been closed. Danny had left. The triangle was broken. All that remained were the shards of a shattered marriage, held together by a mix of love, guilt, anger, and forced acceptance. Weeks later, I found myself in the backyard, fixing a loose fence post. Anna stepped out, carrying a glass of water. She handed it to me, her eyes lingering on mine. Do you need help? She asked gently. I took a sip, set the glass down. I got it, I said, the old reflex of shutting her out surfacing. But I paused, looking at her defeated posture. I exhaled. Sure, I added, softer. Hold the post while I hammer. She knelt, braced the fence upright. I swung the hammer, each strike echoing in the late afternoon air. Sweat beaded on my forehead. She watched me, unflinching. It felt symbolic, somehow. We were repairing a broken piece of our home together. When it was finally secure, I stepped back, hands on my hips, breathing hard. She stood up, dusting off her knees. Thank you for letting me back in, she whispered. Her voice trembled. I know it's not easy. I know you have every reason to push me away. I stared at the fence. You're right, I said. But something in me can't let this go. Maybe I'm too spiteful, maybe I'm too stubborn. Or maybe I just, still want the pieces of what we had. She moved closer, tentatively resting her hand on my arm. I turned to look at her. In that moment, all the anger, the betrayal, the heartbreak seemed to swirl together, forming some new shape I couldn't name. Her eyes glistened with tears that didn't fall. I reached up, brushed my thumb across her cheek. She leaned into the touch, eyes fluttering closed. My heart pounded, a war inside me, the part that wanted vengeance, the part that still longed for the woman I married. I gave a half smile. Don't mistake my calm for forgiveness, I warned softly. I'm still hurting. I might always hurt. She nodded, eyes still closed, a single tear escaping. I understand. I accept it. Then she opened her eyes, and we stood there, silent, battered souls in a battered yard, clinging to each other because we had nowhere else to go. A breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and I felt a strange sense of acceptance wash over me. The taste of heartbreak was still there, but so was a grim determination. My father was gone, Anna had betrayed me, Danny had slunk away, and the boy I cherished wasn't mine by blood, but he was still mine in every way that mattered. I'd been gutted, hollowed, shattered, and somehow I was still standing. Maybe stronger, maybe colder, maybe both. We went inside together, shoulders nearly touching. The old camera was still on the shelf, facing the room, powerless now that I'd flipped it off. We walked past it, no words spoken. In the kitchen, the boy was drawing pictures at the table. He smiled up at us, eyes bright with innocent trust. Anna drifted to him, ruffled his hair. I stood behind them, a quiet presence. Later that night, I tucked him in, reading from his favorite storybook. He grinned sleepily, hugging me tight. Night, Dad, he murmured, oblivious to the turmoil behind my eyes. I kissed his forehead, smoothed his blanket. Then I left his room, closing the door softly. I passed the master bedroom and noticed Anna inside, sitting on the edge of the bed. The lamp's soft glow accentuated the anxiety in her expression. I stepped in. She looked up, face uncertain. Are you okay? She asked. I didn't answer at first. I just let the silence stretch, my mind replaying the months of chaos. Then I sat down beside her, shoulders slumping. I'm not okay, I finally said, my voice a ragged whisper. But I'm here. She gently placed her hand over mine, and we stayed like that a long while, breathing in sync. Outside, the night stretched on, but the house felt strangely still. A storm had passed, yet the damage remained. Rebuilding would be slow, if it happened at all. But at least, for now, we were side by side. In that silence, I let myself feel everything, the bitterness, the betrayal, the faint flicker of hope. My father was gone, taken from me in the same breath that exposed my wife's secret. I had buried him with dignity. Now, in a sense, I was burying the man I used to be, the trusting, naive husband. The new me was sharper-edged, colder. Yet ironically, that made me capable of standing my ground. I wouldn't let her or Danny or anyone else define me as a victim. I had been wrecked, and I had survived. My breath caught in my throat as I felt the weight of it all, a mixture of grief and grudging strength. "I'm still here," I repeated, more to myself than to her. She nodded, pressing her forehead against my shoulder. We were wounded, exhausted. But we were alive. For better or worse, we had a chance, maybe just a flicker, but still a chance, to reshape what was left. In that moment, something like an ending settled over me. Not a joyous, triumphant ending, but one carved out of pain and resolve. I realized that was enough. I let out a slow exhale, closed my eyes, and let the darkness behind my lids envelop me like a final, weary embrace. Anna whispered, "I love you," so softly it was almost inaudible. I said nothing. My silence hung between us, speaking louder than any words. At last, I placed my hand on her head, gently, almost like a blessing or a curse. My last thought before the hush of the night claimed me was simple and stark. I am ruined. And I am stronger for it.